It was a mess of voices and rolling bags at Dallas Love Field that morning. People moved like current, fast, unforgiving. A toddler wailed near security. Announcements stuttered overhead in broken cadence. My phone buzzed again. Flight 289 to Bentonville. Boarding in 30 minutes. I tightened my grip on my carry-on and picked up the pace. I had to be there. Jonah's recital was today, his first solo. He'd been practicing for weeks, his small fingers dancing across the keys while I nodded along, pretending not to tear up when he didn't notice. "You'll be there, right, Dad?" he'd asked last night, voice soft. "Promise?" I promised. I always keep my promises. That's when it happened. I almost tripped over a little girl dragging a unicorn suitcase across the concourse. Muttering a soft apology, I sidestepped, and then stopped cold. Ahead, near the middle of Terminal A, stood an old man. Not just old, worn. His jacket hung unevenly off his shoulders, his left leg slightly bent like it never quite healed right. He stood still amid the rush, squinting up at the departure screens. No one stopped. No one asked. A businessman brushed past and muttered, "Watch it, old-timer." The man didn't respond. Just stood, a duffel slung over one shoulder, gaze flicking back and forth like he was looking for something he couldn't name. My watch ticked louder. 24 minutes to boarding. I could have kept walking. I could have kept my head down and told myself it wasn't my place. But then my father's voice came back, clearer than the announcement overhead. "If you ever see one of our own alone, you stop. Doesn't matter where you're headed. Doesn't matter what it costs." He told me that from a hospital bed, the day before he slipped away for good. And I'd nodded. Promised. I took one last look at my boarding pass. Then I turned around. My dad wasn't one for speeches. He didn't wear his service like a badge. More like a burden, worn soft and quiet. He'd joined the Marines at 19, sent to Beirut in the early 80s, back when no one really knew what was going to happen but everyone had a sense it would be bad. He never talked much about the bombing. Just once, he told me about the sound. Said it didn't come like thunder. Said it was closer to silence being torn in half. After that, he mostly stayed quiet. Came home, found work, raised me on mechanics' wages and moral certainties. He didn't care if the world noticed him. He only cared that he kept his word, especially to his own. I grew up watching how he treated other veterans. At diners, in hardware stores, at baseball games. Didn't matter the branch or the age. If a guy had that certain walk, or the faded cap with the unit patch, Dad would nod. Sometimes that's all he did, just nodded. Other times, he'd pay their tab. Sometimes, just hand them a folded 20 and say, "For the road." I asked once why he did it. He said, "We made a deal. When we came home, we'd look out for each other. Some of us kept that deal." Then he paused. "And some didn't." I didn't join up. That surprised him, I think. But he never said a word. I went into construction. Spent my days under sun and scaffolding. Got certified as an EMT after a buddy's accident made me realize I needed to be more than just strong. I needed to be useful. He liked that. When I got my certificate, he took me out for pie. That was his version of a parade. When he got sick, it came quick. A stubborn ache in his back turned into stage 4 before we knew what we were looking at. I took off work, slept on the pullout at his place, learned more about pill schedules and insurance denials than I ever wanted to. He didn't complain, didn't want a fuss. But in those last weeks, he talked more. Not about war, not much, mostly about responsibility. "Jonah's lucky," he told me once, voice thin as thread. "You show up. That's more than most." I tried to brush it off. He didn't let me. "No," he said. "You listen. You show up. That boy's gonna grow up knowing what a man sounds like when he keeps his word." He closed his eyes then coughed. When I thought he was asleep, he whispered one more thing. "Don't forget our own, no matter the moment." That was the last promise I ever made to him. His ashes sit on the mantel now, in a box he built himself. Walnut. Hand carved. No plaque. He didn't want a nameplate. Said, "The ones who know don't need it." So when I saw the old man in the terminal, alone, forgot. I didn't hesitate. I didn't ask if I had time. I didn't weigh what I might miss. Because I'd already made a vow, long before I booked that ticket. Because a promise made in a hospital room matters just as much in an airport terminal. Because that man, lost and limping, was one of ours. I approached him slowly. He had that fixed stare, the kind people wear when they're trying not to look lost. He was scanning the departure board like it owed him an explanation. "Sir," I said, "need some help?" He blinked, turned toward me. Blue eyes, faded like denim left too long in the sun. His hair was thin and white, combed back with care, not vanity. A duffel strap pulled against his shoulder. He nodded, polite. Yes, I think so. My gate moved again. D14, I think. Can't seem to find it. I glanced at the board. B3, entirely different terminal. A long walk. Not impossible, but cruel for a man walking with a limp, dragging what looked like a military-issue bag older than me. We'll get there, I told him. I've got time. It was a lie. I didn't have time, but the promise didn't care about schedules. We started walking. Slow. People moved around us like water parting around a stone. A woman in heels grunted when we slowed her down. A man in a sports coat said, "Jesus, it's like trying to pass a parade." I ignored them. So did he. He told me his name was Ed Ramsey. 82. Born in Montana, raised near Helena. Served in the Air Force, logistics and reconnaissance. Korea, Vietnam, and long Cold War stretches in between. This trip, reunion. A few old buddies, what's left of them, were gathering in Charlotte. They hadn't been in the same room in 30 years. Ed had taken 2 flights to get this far. Hadn't flown in over a decade. Couldn't afford it. But his daughter found him a voucher and booked it with miles. Gave him a hug, a handwritten itinerary, and told him, "You've earned this." Now he was alone. Lost. His hip had been replaced last year. It ached from the strain. He hadn't eaten since early morning, but didn't want to lose his bearings. He stood near the gate he thought was his, hoping someone might call his name. No one did. He hadn't asked anyone for help. I asked why. He shrugged. "It's not what we did. You figure things out. Don't bother folks." But I saw how he leaned on his bag, how the corner of his eye twitched every few steps. We passed a group of airline staff chatting near a kiosk. One noticed him, looked down, then back to her phone. A young guy in a hoodie shoulder-checked Ed slightly and muttered, "Watch it, old-timer." Ed didn't react, just blinked and kept moving. That did something to me. I'd seen that same look in my father once. Same silence. Same refusal to show pain, even when the body protested. Halfway to Terminal B, we paused near a bench. Ed eased down slow, clutching his knee. He took a sip from a warm water bottle and looked around like he was somewhere much farther away than an airport. "This used to be different," he said softly. "You wore a uniform. People used to thank you. Now you're in the way." I wanted to argue, wanted to tell him the world still cared. But just then, a woman glanced at us and said to her friend, "Airports need to move people like that out of the way." I clenched my jaw, but Ed just gave a small, sad smile. "I'm not mad," he said. "They're just busy. World keeps spinning." Maybe so, but that didn't make it right, and it sure didn't mean I'd leave him to finish this alone. We stood again, pressed forward. We walked the rest of the way with quiet between us. The kind of silence that means something. Not empty, just full of everything not said. I kept checking my watch. 12 minutes to boarding. Jonah's recital flashed in my mind. The plastic folding chairs, the laminated program with his name circled in red pen, the little bow tie he insisted on wearing. I heard his voice. "You'll be there, right, Dad?" My chest tight. Still, I matched Ed's pace, step for step. Terminal B was less chaotic, quieter, but still no signs of grace. No wheelchair offers, no announcements. Just us, shuffling along the wall, trying to reach gate B3 before the last call. We made it with 3 minutes to spare. Ed looked up at the sign and exhaled, like he'd reached the summit of something only he understood. "Guess I'll sit now," he said, more to himself than to me. I guided him to a chair. His knees cracked as he settled. That's when a voice called from behind. "Mr. Turner?" I turned, surprised. A man in uniform stood near the gate agent. Clean lines, sharp presence. Army dress blues, not ceremonial, but polished with purpose. "I'm Lieutenant Daniel Riley," he said, approaching. "Airline liaison officer. We were notified. Your father served with my uncle. Ed called us earlier. Said he might need a hand getting to his reunion." I blinked. "You're here for him?" The lieutenant smiled. "I'm here for both of you." Ed looked confused. "I didn't call anyone," he murmured. Riley knelt down beside him. "Actually, sir, you did. Decades ago, when you pulled my uncle out of a down C-130 in 71. He never forgot. Neither did we." Ed's eyes widened. "I remember that crash," he said quiet. "Didn't know he lived." "He did. Because of you." Riley turned to me. "Mr. Turner, we've arranged something. There's a medical transport plane heading north. Just finished a patient drop near here. They've agreed to make a detour." My heart skipped. "Detour where?" Riley's smile widened. "Bentonville. You'll make the recital." I didn't know what to say. Didn't even ask how they knew about my son, or why they'd go through the trouble. Maybe Ed told them more than he remembered. Maybe it didn't matter, because I stood there, caught between disbelief and gratitude, and watched as the impossible rearranged itself to keep a promise I hadn't dared expect could be kept. Ed patted my shoulder. "You helped me, son. Looks like the world wanted to help you back." We walked to the small side gate escorted by Riley and 2 others. A transport van was waiting. The driver, a woman with graying hair and a flight badge that said, USAF retired, opened the door and gave me a nod that went deeper than words. As we pulled away, I looked back once. The crowd moved on, but I'd remember that terminal forever. The transport van rolled onto the tarmac, the hum of rubber on concrete a steady rhythm against the rush of jet engines in the distance. Ed sat beside me, hands resting on his duffel, eyes half closed. He looked tired now, not defeated, just worn thin by time and travel. I watched him breathe slowly, in and out, like the way my dad used to fall asleep in the recliner, one hand always resting on his chest, as if guarding something invisible. The flight crew was waiting as we pulled up. They wore blue jumpsuits, insignia stitched sharp on each sleeve. No one saluted. No one barked orders. Just nods and firm handshakes. The pilot, a woman with a calm voice and firm grip, walked over. "We're wheels up in 10, she said. "Should have you in Bentonville by the time the lights go on." Lights. Stage lights. Jonah's little fingers curling over the piano keys. I felt something well in my throat. "Thank you," I managed. She nodded. "It's what we do for each other." Inside the small aircraft, it was cooler than expected. Clean. No frills. Just 2 rows of seating, a stretcher bay in the back, and a folded cot for emergencies. They handed me headphones and a bottle of water. I didn't realize how dry my mouth was until I drank. Ed sat across from me. He looked out the window like he was watching something only he could see. We lifted gently. No fanfare. Just sky. As we climbed, I thought of the day I buried my father. I had stood in full suit, the box of ashes in my arms, not crying, just holding my son beside me, holding my other hand. I remembered thinking, this is how the baton passes. Quiet. Heavy. I looked out the window now, clouds drifting beneath us, and thought, this is how we carry each other. Over the intercom, the pilot announced our descent. I leaned to look. Below us, green fields opened like a quilt. There, near the edge of one clearing, I saw rows of folding chairs. A pop-up stage. Little kids squirming in dress clothes. One of them stood apart, craning his neck. Jonah. Waiting. We landed on a short runway near a private field behind the school. A fire marshal waved us in. I stepped down onto gravel and soft grass. The crowd turned. The announcer tapped the mic. And now, someone special has just arrived. I don't remember crossing the lawn. Only Jonah's face lighting up. Only the way he ran, tie crooked, hair sticking out, music sheets crumpled in one hand, and crashed into me like I was the only thing that mattered. You came. I told you I would. He nodded fast, breathless. I waited. I know, I said, holding his face gently. I wasn't going to let you down. Behind us, Ed stood beside the pilot. He watched with a small smile. Didn't interrupt. Didn't need to. That moment wasn't about him. But he understood it better than anyone. The recital began a few minutes later. Jonah sat at the bench, hands trembling. He glanced once more at me. I gave him a thumbs up. He played. Not perfect. A missed note here, a slip there. But I'd never heard anything more beautiful. Afterward, Ed approached. Jonah looked up at him. You came on the plane too? Ed smiled. Sure did. Jonah squinted. Are you a soldier? Was, Ed said. Long ago. You're cool, Jonah said. Then, you want to get ice cream with us? Ed laughed. Maybe just this once. We sat under the school's oak trees afterward, the last of the folding chairs being packed away by PTA volunteers. Jonah was on his second scoop of vanilla swirl, still in his recital clothes, sneakers untied and his smile smudged with sugar. Ed sat beside him, slower now, watching the boy like he was trying to memorize him. I handed Ed a cup of plain coffee, black. He took it with both hands. You made it, he said quietly, almost like he was still surprised. Because of you, I answered. He didn't argue. Just sit. Later that evening, we walked Ed to the edge of the parking lot where a sedan was waiting, sent by one of the reunion organizers. The driver, a woman in uniform, stood beside the car, door open. Before getting in, Ed reached into his duffel. He pulled out a weathered envelope and handed it to me. What's this? My daughter's address, he said. You ever pass through Helena? stop by. She makes a hell of a meatloaf. Better than an airport hot dog, anyway. I smiled. I will. He looked down at Jonah. You've got a good dad. Jonah nodded, solemn. He promised he'd be here. Ed placed a hand on his shoulder. And he was. Then he turned to me one last time. Thank you for slowing down. Thank you for walking. We shook hands like something had passed between us that didn't need to be named. The sedan pulled away. I watched until it turned the corner. The next morning, the story hit local news. Veteran helps father make recital via military flight detour. Some video crew at the event had caught the landing. A journalist pieced together the rest from the airline's public statement. It wasn't a big story, just a 2-minute segment at the end of the nightly news. But it traveled. By Friday, the Veterans Alliance posted it online. By Saturday, people were reaching out, messages from strangers who had missed things, broken promises, or kept them and never told anyone. The local airport called, asked if Jonah and I would come speak during their Memorial Day event. I said we would. Jonah asked if Ed would be there. I don't know, I said, but I'll send him a letter. And I did. A few weeks later, a package arrived. Inside was a folded flag, a photo of Ed in uniform, barely 20, and a short note. I kept your son's drawing. It reminded me what we fight for. I kept your promise, too. We all do. In our way. Be well, Ed. Tucked behind the letter was the drawing Jonah had given him. A man in an old Air Force jacket walking beside a boy in a bow tie, their shadows shaped like a saluting soldier. At the Memorial Day event, Jonah stood on stage, fidgeting with the mic. I want to thank the pilot, and the plane, and the soldiers, he said. But mostly I want to thank my dad. He paused, because he showed me that a promise means something. The crowd clapped. I didn't look for the camera crews or the veterans in the back row. I just looked at my son, and I nodded. The school added a small plaque in the music room, in honor of those who show up, not just in uniform, but in presence. A recital made possible by a promise kept. Sometime later, I passed through Helena on a job. I stopped by the address Ed gave me. His daughter welcomed me like she'd been expecting. Meatloaf was, in fact, incredible. She showed me a picture on the mantle. Her father at the reunion, flanked by his old unit, a glass raised in his hand. They were laughing. I hadn't seen him smile like that in years, she said. I left the house carrying a jar of homemade jam and the kind of peace that lingers. They call them small acts. Stopping for an old man, carrying a bag, missing a flight for a child's recital. But small doesn't mean forgettable. It means personal. It means real. I didn't set out to change anyone's day. I only remembered what my father taught me. Don't walk past your own. Don't weigh your convenience against someone else's need. And never let the pace of the world convince you to leave someone behind. That morning in the airport, I had a choice. My son or a stranger. But it was never a choice between them. It was a promise that made room for both. Because when we show up for each other, the world bends quietly to meet us. Ed didn't ask for help. He never had. But that's what makes it matter more. Not because he needed to be saved, but because someone finally saw him. Because kindness isn't about pity, it's about recognition. Jonah still asks about Ed sometimes. I tell him the truth. That Ed walked through the fire so others could come home. That he spent his last years not bitter, but generous. That one morning, our paths crossed, and neither of us walked alone. We keep the flag folded by the piano now, and the drawing framed beside it. I look at them when life gets too loud, and I remember, sometimes, the greatest journeys begin when we choose to turn around, even in an airport terminal, especially there.